Guten Abend. Oh my God, I can't see a person out there. I got lights in my face here. How y'all doing this evening? All right. Hey, how great was that band, huh? We're gonna have some dancing afterwards. Tom Burrow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, and particularly the early part of your speech. Thank you for articulating and ticking off all the reasons why Kimberly and I were such big supporters of Donald Trump during this last campaign. By the way, I think Bi-Coastal is a new constituency group in the Democratic Party. Be interested to join that. But I guess we're kind of tri-coastal in a way. But anyway, that was wonderful, and we had such a good time in Neuss, thanks to Christoph Heusgen, who, of course, it is a requirement of every American ambassador that they participate in the Neuss Schützenfest. And Tom, you look damn good in a top hat and tails, I just want to tell you. But we actually had a blast. It was a very, very fun couple of days. And so thanks so much for coming here and for doing that. I know you'd rather be dressing up and on the streets of Cologne with Marty, well, what we call Mardi Gras, but really appreciate your being here and the time that we've all had together. Friedrich Merz, what can I say about you? First of all, thank you so much for those words, for the incredible support that you have given to me and to Kimberly and our children over the course of our time here. Friedrich and I have probably spent more time on more podiums, working together, particularly on TTIP. By the way, that worked out pretty well, didn't it? On TTIP, we did a hell of a job. And in any event, than probably any two other people. And I've just enjoyed every single moment of it. And you're right, you know, I mean, you're saying we didn't really know who everybody was at that very first dinner, the Atlantik Brücke dinner. What a wonderful bookend this is to our time here. But it's a little nerve-wracking as the new ambassador to walk into a dinner, the room of luminaries from German politics and business and society, and know they're going to be taking the measure of you. But truthfully, all of you made us feel so relaxed and so at home and so welcome that it really, I think, got us off to a great start. And I just want to thank you for that and for your incredible leadership of Atlantik Brücke. My understanding is at one point in time it was getting to be known as Atlantik Broken. You have taken it to a very high level, and a big round of applause for Friedrich Merz and the team at Atlantik. So, by the way, these introductory remarks don't count as part of my time limit for the speech, okay? I also, I got to tell you, I was really touched to walk in to this room and see so many Bundestag members and leaders of the Bundestag here. It just really very, very touching. But I want to thank all of you so much for being here, for taking the time out. I understand that President Gauck has something going on tonight, the nerve of him, by the way, to compete with this, but that he has something, and I had it, by the way, went to his speech today. It was extraordinary, and I would encourage everybody to read it if you haven't had a chance. But I really deeply appreciate your being here, so thank you very, very much. And Marie and Mark, you know, you don't know this, but my mother was Canadian. So to have the Canadian ambassador to Germany, who's become a very dear friend, sitting with us at this table tonight also means a great deal. So thank you so much for being here. And there are two other people I want to introduce, but they are predecessors of Kimberly and me as ambassadorial families here in Germany. And as proof that there is life after these roles, and in fact, that it's very possible to continue making a profound contribution to the transatlantic relationship and to life in Berlin. I really want to thank Connie Martin and Gail Burt for being here, and in particular for their leadership of the American Academy in Berlin. Gail, who's the chair of the board, and Connie, of course, who's on the board, but of course her husband, Dick Holbrook, Ambassador Richard Holbrook, founded the American Academy in Berlin. So a big round of applause. You know, I could go around this room, if I could see you, and probably say something about every single person here, because we have so many dear friends and friendships that we've made over time. And I will make the same offer to you, which is, you know, and Tom, I appreciate the comment that we're welcome in everybody's home. You're all welcome to Los Angeles. Just don't come at the same time, okay? And one final thing, thank you for including so many of my extraordinary colleagues from the embassy. You know, there are all these nice things being said about me tonight, but I love to quote Woody Allen, who said 97% of life is just showing up. And I happen to show up to work with an extraordinary group of people who certainly made me look a lot better than I am. But I will be leaving Germany, and Kimberly will be leaving Germany, but we'll be leaving you in extraordinarily good hands with Deputy Chief of Missions, soon-to-be Chargé Kent Loxton, and his wife and cultural attaché Michelle Loxton here at this table. So give them a... So as you have probably surmised, it is an understatement to say that this occasion is truly bittersweet, because of course in 36 hours before the President-elect takes his oath of office, the Emerson family will board a plane and return to our home in Los Angeles. So tonight is not only a wonderful evening to honor us, but it is our official farewell to you and to the people of Germany. And on behalf of Kimberly and our entire family, I really want to thank all of you for your friendship and your support over the entire course of our time here. Serving as the American ambassador to Germany has truly been the honor of my life. And thank you. And it has been an extraordinary privilege for each and every one of us. It is no secret that our three girls have been a significant part of our presence here in Germany. Taylor and Haley finished high school, and then they took a gap year in Berlin. So they had 3 years here before beginning their freshman year at Wash University in St. Louis. And during their 3 years in Germany, they were able to further develop their soccer and their musical skills, which some of you saw on Morgan Magazine, by the way, about a week ago. But they also made so many new friends on the football field, on the stage, and in their various gap year internships. And in the fall of 2013, Jackie, our oldest daughter, started her freshman year at Stanford University just about a month after I arrived as a freshman ambassador. But last year, she was able to do a semester abroad here at Stanford's Berlin campus, thanks to our good friend Gerhard Casper, who, when he was president of Stanford, founded that campus. And Jackie has spent pretty much all of her vacations here in Germany. And all three girls, you should know, are missing their first week of school back at their universities. So, all right, grades don't have to be that big this semester. We'll be looking for internships and jobs from the people in this crowd who'll surely understand. But I have to tell you that when they heard that we had purchased this apartment in Berlin, they literally all three cried tears of joy. As a board member of Human Rights Watch, as well as proving that with the Emersons you really did get 2 ambassadors for the price of 1, Kimberly became deeply engaged in Germany's humanitarian, arts, and entrepreneurial communities. And as the refugee crisis unfolded, she worked proactively to help including going to Lesbos to help there. And Kimberly has built so many close friendships here in Germany that there was no way we could possibly leave without having that apartment. And honey, you have opened up our lives, you've opened up the embassy, you've opened up our sense of community here in Berlin and in Germany so much. I love you and thank you very much. And by the way, yeah, wir haben ein Koffer in Berlin. But Kimberly's going to be back here in about a month or about 2 months because she and Christoph and Ina Heusken are going to be running the half marathon in Berlin. So get out there and cheer. Now, as several of you have noted tonight, our time here has been anything but uneventful. And we often, many of us in this room, have worked together on the challenges that the United States and Germany have faced over these past 3.5 years, most of which were not even on the radar screen when I was first nominated for this job in the spring of 2013. Consider the following. We've obviously heard mention of the NSA disclosures, but there was the civil war in Syria, the brutality of ISIL and the metastasizing of terrorism into Germany and into Europe and into the United States. The Russian incursion into Ukraine and its illegal annexation of Crimea and NATO's collective response to that effort. The resilience of the Taliban in Afghanistan, Ebola, the Greek financial crisis, Brexit, the loud and vocal opposition to TTIP and the one country in Europe that would benefit most from that trade agreement, the demise of Safe Harbor and the damage that posed to intercompany data transfers, the threat to our governments, our economies, our societies, our companies, and our politics of increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks by both state and non-state perpetrators, and of course the greatest movement of refugees through Europe since the end of the Second World War. The extent of Germany's engagement on these issues has been remarkable. I remember vividly my first Tag der Deutschen Einheit back in 2013 and President Gauck's eloquent speech in which he urged Germany to become more engaged globally. And he spoke about trust, thanking Germany's friends and partners for their steadfast belief that one day this country would be reunited, respected worldwide for its vibrant and stable democracy and for its economic strength. During the seminal and critical early post-war years, the transatlantic partnership was born out of a trust that was defined and nurtured by the members of newly formed organizations, such as the Atlantik Brücke and its sister organization, the American Council on Germany. Both were designed to promote reconciliation and understanding between Germans and Americans and to build connections so that people could not only follow, but understand the developments in both countries. And over the decades, transatlantic partners have invested heavily in this relationship and they have strengthened their trust. And to that point, let me unequivocally state that the European project, which has long had and continues to have bipartisan support in the United States, is one of the great successes of world history. When Europe, go ahead, you can clap for that. When Europe and the EU prospers, so too does the United States. And if some in the incoming administration do not understand that now, I am hopeful that in time they will. Well, as it turned out, trust became a major theme of my ambassadorship and a challenge as well. You've heard plenty of mention tonight about that first speech, the elephant in the room. And unquestionably, from day one, my top priority became doing everything that I could to try to help rebuild the trust between our two countries that have been so badly shaken. At that time, cooperation between our intelligence services was seen in a very negative light. To put it bluntly, the whole concept of intelligence and its relationship to law enforcement was radioactive. From the beginning, though, I stressed the need to reform, but to do so in a way that did not jeopardize what I believe is one of the fundamental responsibilities of our governments, and that is the protection of our citizens. Well, President Obama implemented important reforms, and the tragic reappearance of terrorists in Europe underscored that we have to take necessary steps to obtain and share information within Germany, within Europe, and between the United States and Europe for the purpose of disrupting and stopping them. The reality is that we live in an era where non-state actors and metastasized terrorist groups, having gone to school, by the way, on how our intelligence services operate, thanks to highly publicized, hacked, and leaked information, have become very adept at using evolving technology to recruit and to train and to plan and to carry out their attacks. Accordingly, it is essential that we continue working together to stay one step ahead of them. And the good news is, as I look back over the last 3.5 years, I can tell you affirmatively, we have never worked together more cooperatively or effectively than we are today. And yet, to be sure, in today's world, there is no such thing as 100% security. The attack last month in the heart of a traditional Christmas market nestled around the Memorial Church brought home to us once again the threat of violence and violent extremism in our societies. Nevertheless, in the face of such horrific violence, it is even more important that we hold fast to our values and that we do not allow acts of terror to incite xenophobic resentment or to subvert our way of life. And I have to tell you, I was so moved by the manner in which Berliners came together throughout the holiday season, undeterred by this terrible tragedy, in solidarity and in strength. Now I know that this attack and others before it have added to the ongoing debate in Germany regarding Germany's decision not to turn a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis on its borders in the summer of 2015. Yes, there are likely some terrorists who did come into Germany through the refugee trail. But make no mistake, the vast majority of individuals who have been committing these horrific acts in Europe are homegrown. And the idea that somehow by closing all of its internal borders to those seeking refuge, Europe could eliminate acts of terrorism, or the related assumption that those bent on inflicting harm cannot otherwise find their way into Europe, is preposterous. The course that Chancellor Merkel has chartered, while difficult and challenging, is a demonstration of moral leadership at a time and in a world where that is far too rare. It is a course that, as President Obama said in Berlin last November, gives voice to the principles that bring people together rather than divide them. And that's something that's very much in the long-term national security interests of both of our countries. Chancellor Merkel and Außenminister Steinmeier described the German-American relationship as a cornerstone of their country's foreign policy. And from the American perspective, there are few other countries that project the same resolve, capability, and trust on the world stage as Germany. Our partnership is indispensable. And in these complex times, a certain amount of predictability will be important as we go forward. which brings me, of course, to the topic that I presume is on everybody's mind tonight, and that is, what will be the priorities of the new administration, especially as it relates to Europe and to Germany? So let me share a few thoughts on that. First, in terms of foreign policy, it's no secret that there may well be some significant differences between the incoming and the outgoing presidential administrations. Attitudes about climate change, immigration, Russian aggression, the Mideast, the Iran nuclear deal, and the role of multilateral institutions, to name a few. Possible changes in our relationship with Russia have been in the news quite a bit lately. Now, President Obama has always believed that it is important to have a good working relationship with Russia. That is clearly in all of our interests. But having a strong relationship with another country does not preclude standing up for our values. And after the lessons of the past century, we need to send a clear message to powerful nations that the unilateral redrawing of boundary lines of adjacent weaker countries cannot and will not be tolerated. And neither will we tolerate attempts to manipulate the electoral processes of sovereign nations. The international community needs to stand up when this happens. There need to be consequences, and they cannot be allowed to simply fade away because maintaining them seems to be inconvenient, politically awkward, or because somebody says something nice about you. And as we saw during last week's Senate confirmation hearings, many members of the United States Congress strongly believe this as well. More broadly speaking, President-elect Trump campaigned on a foreign policy platform that was much more isolationist in nature than the long-held partisan consensus in administrations going all the way back to President Truman and the Marshall Plan. Yet many of the challenges that we face are not ones that America or Europe can solve on their own. And President Obama said that one of the main topics in his discussion with the president-elect right after the election did concern the crucial role of the United States in addressing global challenges. The fact is, good leadership on behalf of one's own country requires engaging the world as a whole and participating effectively in multilateral institutions. That means that the United States, Germany, the G7, the G20, the European Union, NATO, all need to maintain and in some cases expand upon our engagement in the transatlantic alliance and in global affairs. Now, I know there's some concern here on this topic as it relates to comments that have recently been made by some in the administration. But as President Obama pointed out, once you're in the White House, and Tom was indicating this as well, once you begin interacting with world leaders, once you have the visibility into the full complexities of the challenges that we face, the demands of that office tend to shape and in some cases significantly modify your thinking. And the fact that the President-elect's designated Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and Director of National Intelligence are all career-long internationalists is a positive sign. So we shall see. A second topic. I am fairly certain that one of the President-elect's priorities will be strengthening the American economy in hard-hit areas of the formerly industrial Midwest and in the rural communities of the United States. That's where he got most of his support. He ought to be paying attention to those areas. The question is, how will he go about accomplishing this? Through a combination of domestic infrastructure spending and global economic engagement, or through a more protectionist approach? I think that most of us here tonight believe that trade can be a key to expanding global economic prosperity. But as we all saw, trade was a red-hot focal point of the presidential campaign. And I'm sure that you've all heard that the President-elect has declared the Trans-Pacific Partnership dead, And the leadership in Congress, which was previously supportive of TPP, went along with that, failing to push for its approval during the lame duck. This is unfortunate. When you consider that China is seeking to advance its own trade agreement with the countries in the region, it is clear that the United States may have lost an opportunity to have helped set higher standards for global trade. Now, the domestic politics of TTIP in the United States, not so difficult as they are with TPP. Yet it is, as I said repeatedly over the past year, highly unlikely that the new administration will make this a priority either. And candidly, given the reluctance of many European politicians to forcefully confront the vocal opposition to TTIP, and the embarrassment of the EU's efforts to approve CETA, I think Europe really needs to make clear to the United States that it wants and can implement a newly negotiated TTIP, whether by that or another name. Beyond that, I know that there is also concern here over recent comments about Germany's trade surplus with the United States, made and built just the other day. Now, I trust that in time, the new administration will come to understand that there is a difference between trade surpluses that are generated by low-wage, low-standard economies with control over their currencies that have erected their own protectionist barriers, and those generated by high-wage, high-standard economies operating on a much more level playing field that simply make high-quality goods that Americans want to buy. And by the way, BMW is on track to make more cars in Charleston, South Carolina than it does in Bavaria. At some point, hopefully, trade negotiations of some sort will commence between the United States and Europe. And you all know the arguments for TTIP. Many of you were active, along with Friedrich and me, in trying to explain this to a skeptical public here in Germany. But clearly, when we finally do go forward, we have got to do a much better job. Complain as we might about the well-funded and often truth-challenged opposition to TTIP, we waited far too long to get the positive story out in ways that were clear and understandable. The days when governments can go off and spend years quietly negotiating a trade agreement and then unveil it to an eagerly awaiting public are over. With well-funded, perpetual advocacy groups, many of which depend on a boogeyman to generate their grassroots funding, and with pervasive social media, allowing for the creation of silos where information and misinformation is exchanged back and forth at ever-increasing volumes, the effort to explain the purposes and benefits of a trade agreement needs to begin with a well-structured, well-funded, proactive campaign from day one. There also needs to be greater transparency from day one. And I'm not talking about conducting the negotiations in public. I mean, that would make no sense. Germany doesn't conduct its coalition agreement negotiations in public, and they have great impact on people's lives. But what we need to do is explain from the outset, what are the objectives? What's included in the negotiations and what is not? Where's progress being made and where is it not? Otherwise, as we've seen, a vacuum becomes created into which anxiety-ridden fears and misinformation can be inserted. And finally, from the outset, the fact that every trade agreement will have dislocating effects on working people has got to be acknowledged. And our governments need to work just as hard at addressing the impact of that dislocation as they do at negotiating the agreement. Now, don't get me wrong, there are always going to be people who will oppose any trade agreement that comes along, but I think if we take these steps, we'll have a much greater likelihood of success in the future. The final issue I'd like to discuss is something that I've heard from virtually everyone that I have spoken to in Germany since the election, and that is the concern that so many have about the possible impact of our election on those coming up in France, Germany, and the EU this year and next. Well, we all know what happened in the United States, and it certainly wasn't how I or many others thought things would turn out. And of course, anytime you have a close election, there are multiple reasons as to what happened and why. But fundamentally, what happened in this election and why? The very complexity of our world, and I think Tom touched on this a little bit too, the very complexity of our world, fueled by the rapid pace of globalization and technological change, has created a pervasive sense of unease. Increasing economic, cultural, demographic, and social changes, coupled with a polarization in government and in society that makes it harder to get things done, have significantly diminished public confidence in the political process. In the United States and in Europe, people on both extremes of the political spectrum are increasingly angry because they don't think government or any establishment institution, including the business world, by the way, is working in their interests. And polarization in society has been enhanced by the instantaneous news environment, where a 140-character tweet can capture the news cycle for an entire day, and by the tendency of social media and ideologically targeted cable news programs, which is a bigger problem in our country than in Germany, to create silos where people can easily isolate themselves, getting information only from sources that reflect their pre-existing points of view. People increasingly choose their news, and their opinions are shaped often in a post-factual environment. The danger, as we've seen, is that this siloization creates an echo chamber of misinformation and ultimately of anger that can be used to generate political support or to undermine confidence in our electoral processes. This anger and the anxiety from which it arises contributed to the Brexit vote, to the rise of populism, both right and left here in Europe, and to the anti-establishment voting that we saw in our election 2016, as well as the anti-trade, anti-immigrant movements that we're seeing on both sides of the Atlantic. So the dislocating effect of globalization has got to be acknowledged and addressed. And so too must the relationship between social media, the press, perpetrators of fake news, and our politics, especially with the European elections coming up. And I think this might be, Friedrich, a topic for further examination by Atlantik Brücke. Now, I know there's a great deal of concern in Germany over the incoming administration, and the relationship that it may have with Germany. But I am convinced that the significance and importance of that relationship will not diminish over the coming years. History and politics, as President Obama has said, never moves in a straight line. In his words, we zig, we zag. Sometimes we move in ways that some people think is forward and others think is moving back. Now, what's important is that we retain our faith in democracy and in the lively and open debate that it presupposes. So, returning to the question about the next administration's priorities, for those of you who are trying to read the tea leaves before they really get in there and start putting out policies, I've got some advice. Number one, don't overreact to the tweets. Pay attention to them, but do not get distracted or spun up by them. Tweets are not policy. And often what a president says, even in a meeting and instructions to his staff, believe me, I've been there, I've seen this, is modified substantially after it comes out at the other end of that massive policy-making machine that is the United States government. Second, it is a truism that in government, people are policy. Probably no better example of that than Richard Holbrooke, by the way. So pay attention to the confirmation hearings, which began last week. And by the way, in those hearings, who is asking what questions may be as revealing about how Congress will react to proposed administration policies and how those policies will be shaped as the answers themselves. Third, listen to Friday's inaugural address. We won't be able to because we'll be flying over Greenland or something at the time, but listen to the inaugural address. What it should be is an aspirational statement of the incoming president's vision, goals, and priorities, sort of a high-level roadmap for the next 4 years. Listen to what is said, listen for what is not said, and of equal importance, listen for the tone of how he says it. And then finally, and this is for you policy wonks out there, look closely at the budget that is proposed by the new administration in late February. A president's proposed budget is an operational blueprint. Closely examine what will be spent, what will be cut, and that will show you what the true priorities of the administration are. Accordingly, I would urge folks here in Germany to approach the incoming administration with some patience and with a sense of objectivity, but without hesitating to promote our shared values. And I would encourage you to emphasize with your friends who may be moving in and around the government how our close economic ties and trading relationship in fact help to raise the prosperity of both countries' citizens. So where do we go from here? Yes, Chancellor Merkel and President Obama have an extraordinarily strong personal connection, but you know, it wasn't always so. German-American relations go far beyond the name or political affiliation of the current president. The basis of our close relationship is, at its core, the personal contact between our citizens. Our people flow across the Atlantic as writers, journalists, researchers, scientists, artists, students, business people, employees, and tourists. Our two-way trade and investment opens up new opportunities for synergies, new products, and innovations in technology. And strong institutions like the Atlantik Brücke and the American Academy in Berlin are dynamic platforms for German-American collaboration on issues of global importance. So we need to redouble our efforts on the people-to-people and the business-to-business fronts, especially as we feel that we're walking into or we're beginning to enter choppy waters. I concluded my remarks in that very first speech to you 3.5 years ago by talking about the crucial importance of reaching out to young people, and that will be my parting thought for this evening. One of the most indelible connections that Europe and the United States share as partners is the miracle of 70 years ago, when from the ashes of global devastation and genocide, new principles were crafted and implemented for governing relations. There are entire generations of Germans and Americans, however, who did not live through the searing experiences of the second half of the 20th century. People for whom the Luftbrücke, Ich bin ein Berliner, tear down this wall, and reunification are so much as ancient history. Our vibrant transatlantic relationship is not an inherited trait. Its value needs to be transmitted from one generation to the next. And that's why we in Mission Germany spend so much time in our public diplomacy to work with youth. During his visit to Berlin, shortly after our election, at a small lunch in the embassy, President Obama was actually asked what gave him the greatest concern and what gave him the greatest hope. Concern, by the way, was climate change. On the hope side, without hesitating, Barack Obama said he placed his hope in young people. But then he noted subsequently that we've got to do more than simply celebrate or despair about presidential elections. We need to do more to help young people find their voices, hone their activism, and make a difference. Politics can be frustrating. But as many young people are seeing this for the first time in their lives, particularly in the UK and the US, they're learning that elections have consequences. We need to focus on how, in our day-to-day lives, in our local civic lives, in our media, in our culture, we can all be a part of the solution. And that is what much of the work of Atlantik Brücke is all about. And so, in closing, Kimberly and I would again like to thank you for your dedication and for building upon the close relationship between Germany and the United States, and of course for our friendship as well. Yes, both Europe and the US face a set of long-run challenges, but on all of these, we have much that we can learn from one another, and with pragmatism, cooperation, flexibility, creativity, and hard work, there will be much that we can do together in the months and years to come. God bless you, and thank you so much.